I recently distributed a customizable Safari content blocker, and so I wanted to publish a tutorial on a couple of easy methods to customize the blocker list from within the containing app. But first and foremost, I just want to dispel the widespread myth that predefining blocking rules precludes fine-grained customization of the rules. Major developers are saying things like, blocker lists can't be customized to exclude specific YouTubers. But even aside from fine-grained customization of the list, it seems like some developers aren't sure how to let users even enable or disable predefined lists from within the app, and are instead resorting to cluttering users' Safari extension preferences as a substitute for an in-app UI. So that's why I'm making this video, but let's just jump right into it. Here's how to begin with a Safari content blocker template. You'll also want to import Safari services. Two different customization methods are going to be appropriate depending on whether you want to merely enable or disable predefined block lists or actually customize the block list. We'll make an example of the first method start to finish. Then I'll point you towards a working example of the second method and explain most of it. So here's just a diagram explaining the first method. When the user interacts with the UI, his preferences are written to the defaults. When Safari makes its request, these preferences are read by the content blocker, which sends only the appropriate block lists. The app and the extension don't have the same user defaults.standard, so you'll need to enable app groups in order to be able to write to a shared container. When we're done, you'll actually be able to navigate to this folder and see the preferences being written. As promised, we're going to implement this method start to finish, just so you can see how easy it is. So here I am just setting up a basic UI. This default is just coming from the app group ID we set before. Now, whenever one of the checkbox is clicked, it's going to write to the defaults for the key associated with that number, whether it's selected or not. When the app opens, we'll want to make sure the UI matches the defaults rather than resetting every time. Doing that isn't the point of the video, so I'll just copy it in. To reload the content blocker, we'll need to get the content blocker's bundle ID. This function will reload the content blocker when the button is clicked. Otherwise, if there's an error, it'll print the error. And this part I did off camera because it wasn't that interesting. I just did file, new file, and then I made these 3 files ending in .json, with each one containing a different rule. Now, when the request handler receives a request from Safari, the request handler will loop over all 3 defaults, and for each that's true, it creates an extension item and attaches the relevant block list, and then it returns a list of these items. So if all 3 block lists were enabled, it would return an array of 3 items. Now I'll point you towards an example of method 2, which is to have user interaction with the UI generate a totally unique block list. In this example, I wanted the blocker to work before the app was ever opened, and so I provided a default block list to the extension's main bundle. And just to give credit where it's due, this Medium post by Nikolay Durkach was really instructive when I was trying to make this example. The example is called Simplifier for Facebook, and you can clone it from my GitHub page. The link will be in the description. I don't want to spend too much time explaining how I got the checklist working, because I really just followed this video, and so I'll just point you towards this guy's video. It's really good. But briefly, I created this blockable element class and combined 5 instances of it to this list, which will be the data source for the checklist. The table view uses that data source to create these rows sequentially. Each row is able to identify itself by its row number and will run 3 functions when the checkbox is clicked. Firstly, it'll set a user default value to store these preferences even after the app closes. The remaining functions are performed by the view controller and are checkbox clicked and update blocklist JSON. Checkbox clicked toggles the block state for the data source and then refreshes the table view. Importantly, based on the updated data source, it assigns a value to the global string containing all the selectors that should be blocked. Then, update blocklist JSON uses that string to create the new dictionary, converts it to a real JSON, writes it to the shared group container, and then reloads the content blocker. Here's the code that tells the content blocker to find the block list in this shared container, attach it to an extension item, and respond to Safari's request with this item. If the blocklist JSON file doesn't exist, it'll instead use the default block list. Thanks for watching, and if you haven't already, consider joining the Safari Extension Devs subreddit.